I love you. Cooter's here for the moral support. He's sinking in for a long ride.
All right, team. Grab your pancakes or maybe something stronger because today's story is as sticky as it gets. So, George, we are rewinding to the year after we finished high school, back to 2011. And we are in the heart of Quebec, the syrup capital of the world, where a group of sticky-fingered bandits pulled off a scheme so outrageous it makes Dodgy sound like a compliment. More than 70% of the planet's syrupy supply flows out of this place. And during sugaring season, the air smells like pancakes 24/7. It's great, it's fun, and the world is all somewhat out of the GFC. Life is damn good, right? I mean, I personally had mates flying over there, living up gap years, post-high school travels, all the way over in beautiful Canada. But while we were enjoying this time of fun and freedom, some cheeky thieves were plotting a heist that would make even the most seasoned criminals blush. We're talking about over $18 million worth of maple syrup. And yes, syrup, from the world's largest reserve. So if you thought robbing a bank was bold, mate, try stealing this sweet fortune. So yes, that's right. This story isn't just about syrup. It's about meticulous planning, betrayal, and a black market scheme sticky enough to have a few conversations with your breakfast. So buckle up, guys. This is going to be a sweet ride. This is Dirty Money Files, and today's episode is all about the great Canadian maple syrup heist. The crime that left the syrup industry shaken and the world in disbelief.
He's choosing the perfect time for it, aren't you, Cooter? Go on. Yeah.
And with me is my husband, my reason to my unreasonable, George.
And now Cooter's made an entrance too.
Of course, can't do anything without him. So now, as two accountants, we've got a special appreciation, or at least a healthy dose of mockery, for financial crime and how these thieves turned a sticky syrup into a multi-million-dollar side hustle. So, George, I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Would you call this grey area accounting, or just straight up Dodge?
Yeah, or it sounds like amber area accounting to me. It's its own specialty.
Okay, let's set the scene. Welcome to Quebec, home of poutine, hockey, and of course, maple syrup. But don't let the friendly faces fool you, because this is where things get sticky. In 2011, the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers, that's a mouthful, was sitting on a gold mine, literally. They control 72% of the world's maple syrup supply, and their reserve was a fortress of sweet liquid gold. Or at least they thought so. But here's the thing. They weren't just making and storing syrup. They were controlling the market. Honestly, just imagine the Federation as a self-appointed syrup police. They didn't just make the rules, they enforced them, regulated the supply, and whipped everyone into shape. The Federation's strict quotas and regulations were designed to stabilize prices and ensure a steady supply to prevent market crashes and protect producers' livelihoods. However, this tight control also created resentment with the producers. Many felt stifled by the Federation's grip and their limited ability to sell independently and make a profit. This heavy-handed approach inadvertently fueled a black market, where producers could bypass the Federation's rules and sell syrup with higher profit margins.
Maple syrup is not something that I've expected to be like a black market and like a mafia.
It's so heavily regulated that of course it's going to have a black market. I mean, you think about what's going on in Australia with the current rules around vaping. They created a black market and the gov knows it. Honestly, I just can't wait to do an episode on what comes of that. Anyways, they had quotas, strict regulations, enough red tape to tie up a forest, and a tight grip on every bottle that left Quebec. So basically, if you wanted to sell syrup, you had to play by their rules. And underneath this sugary, iron-fisted empire, there was a simmering resentment among certain producers that felt strangled by the Federation's insane control. They weren't just frustrated. They were ready to cook up their own scheme to steal some of that liquid gold and take them dollars. You think Quebec would be all about cozy cabins and maple-flavored everything, but no. As it turns out, underneath all its sugary shack charm, even the land of syrup isn't immune to some sticky business. And now that I want waffles in a cute wooden cabin, let's revert to the actual tea and meet the gang behind the great Canadian maple syrup heist. These guys weren't just slinging syrup, they were scheming, dodging, and flipping off the Federation, one barrel at a time. And first up, we've got ringleader Richard Resellers, a bloke with a taste for syrup and a serious grudge against the Federation. A man in his 30s, he was born and bred into the syrup world, perfecting the art of maple syrup production, learning the craft straight from his family's sugar shack. And for those of you not up to speed with maple syrup culture, let's take a quick detour into the magical world of the sugar shack. Picture a cozy cabin nestled in the woods of eastern Canada, where folks are boiling sap down to syrup like it's the most normal thing in the world. These sugar shacks date back to the 1600s and are basically syrup factories with a rustic twist. Kinda a mishmash of Native American know-how and European sweet cravings. Anyways, once a top dog in the maple syrup world, Richard knew the industry inside out. And fed up with the Federation's overlord BS, he decided to take matters into his own hands. Oh, and did I mention he wasn't a saint before all of this? Richard had a history of dealing with maple syrup on the black market as a barrel roller, aka a shady broker who made deals outside official channels. In 2007, he was slapped with a $1.8 million fine for skirting the rules. A fine that, surprise, surprise, he never paid. Honestly, this guy saw more value in a barrel of syrup than most investors see in a blue chip stock. A true visionary. If your investing strategy includes grand theft syrup, that is.
That's pretty good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Keep the pun coming.
You're welcome. Richard wasn't just flying solo in this game, because every great heist needs an insider. Meet Avik Caron, a former syrup producer who was sick of the Federation's rules. Avik had the keys to the syrup kingdom and the know-how to pull off this thing. He wasn't just in on the plan, he practically drew the floor plan. Because when he learned the Federation planned to stash their liquid gold, maple syrup obviously, in his warehouse, he went straight to Richard and spilled the tea. Or rather, the syrup. I mean, these dudes practically had a whinge sesh over some beers and were like, yeah dude, I'm over it, let's take them for a ride. But, like usually, when you chat shit over beers, you tend to laugh about it the next day, not go full criminal mastermind. Anyways, moving on. Next we have Raymond Resellers, Richard's dad and partner in crime. This wasn't just a rogue son pulling off a dodgy heist. This was a family affair. Raymond offered up the family sugar farm as a hideout for the stolen syrup. Baby! Are you okay?
He's so old. Can't even sit down and stand up.
I shouldn't laugh. And then there's Sebastian Dutrus, the truck driver with the logistic chops to make this whole scheme work. He was the one physically moving the syrup, ensuring it got from the warehouse to its hiding spots. And lastly, we have, and I cannot say this correctly, Antoine St-Pierre, a veteran syrup reseller from New Brunswick with a grudge. He ran a syrupy company called SK Export and rented a warehouse next door, making the perfect front to move massive amounts of stolen syrup without raising an eyebrow. Honestly, when someone calls the Federation a bunch of assholes and then starts a black market syrup ring, you found your guy. Saint-Pierre was the guy who could blend a stolen syrup with the legal stuff and sell it off without anyone noticing a thing. It was like laundering money, except with syrup. So there you have it. our crew of sticky-fingered bandits, and together they ran a criminal network for nearly a year, siphoning off millions of dollars worth of syrup while flying completely under the radar. So with this team assembled and a plan in place, it was time to put their scheme into action. This was a crime that lasted nearly a year, 3,000 tons of syrup, which adds to, if my conversions are correct, 2.7 million litres, stolen bit by bit right under the Federation's nose. Which, sorry, backtrack, that's almost an Olympic-sized pool of bloody maple syrup. Like, can you imagine swimming in that?
I was expecting it to be more, like 2.7 million litres.
Have you seen an Olympic pool? Yeah. Like, oh my God, that's, that's a lot. And it's like, it's thick as well.
Yeah.
So, that's heavy. Anyways, moving on. Where was the stash of gold? In a warehouse in Saint Louis de Blanford. And I hope I said that was
I think you're going to offend a lot of Canadians with this particular episode.
I know. But like, the thing is, I have a French name and I cannot
pronounce it.
Cannot pronounce.
And I think it's Quebec. How do you say Quebec? How have you said Quebec?
Quebec.
I think you're going to offend a lot of Canadians.
I'm Australian, leave me alone. Anyway, so this warehouse, it was guarded with as much security as your nana's biscuit tin. So basically, none. The warehouse was a part of a network of strategic reserves and was one of the largest facilities controlled by the Federation, renting it from our mate, Avik. The inside of the warehouse itself had no alarms, no security cameras, and was only inspected periodically. And this lack of security made it a prime target for anyone daring enough to pull off such a heist. It was almost like they were inviting in trouble. So, Richard and his crew didn't just stumble into this insane heist. They orchestrated it with precision. Avik Caron was crucial, owning and working within the warehouse. He had access to schedules and knew exactly when the inspectors were going to come and which barrels were the most valuable. The crew mapped out every detail, from timing their moves to transporting the syrup. They even made sure the tampered barrels looked full, swapping syrup for water from local rivers and placing them back into position initially to avoid detection. It was a well-oiled operation, executed with precision. So, George, do you think they rehearsed this?
Yes.
Like, all right, lads, let's make sure it looks legit. Roll them barrels, roll them. You're rolling it wrong.
Yeah.
Do it better.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Make it look catch. Anyway, back to the story. Taking the barrels from the warehouse to the Resellers farm, they would siphon syrup using pumps and hoses, refilling it with water from the local river. They would then pack it into unmarked drums and transported it off to their dodgy resellers, all without raising a single eyebrow. At first, they were smart, leaving the barrels full so no one would catch on. But as time went on, they got cockier and started leaving the barrels empty, banking on nobody checking. And leveraging SK Export's so-called business connections, they slung that syrup to all the producers and buyers they could get. So moving both legal and stolen syrup, the paperwork looks squeaky clean. They blended stolen syrup with legit stuff so you couldn't tell the difference. Twisted, but chintz. But it wasn't about looking the part. They knew exactly what they were doing. Each barrel of syrup held around $1,800 worth of liquid gold. They picked the barrels with the biggest payday. By the way, that's more than a crude oil barrel. Greed always knows where to look. And with Litres, the truck driver in play, the syrup was whisked away to their little hideouts, like clockwork. And Raymond's sugar farm? That was the perfect cover. Armed with a forklift and a whole lot of nerve, they got to work. And it gets even better. Before the annual inspection, they tried to cover their tracks by dimming the lights and spraying a little bit of dust around. Because, dust clearly makes everything untouched.
Just look like that old.
It's just,
It's been sitting there for a while.
Yeah, I literally read that they were literally getting on the light.
Yeah.
And shuffling the lights to make the dust sprinkle around. Yeah. Interesting.
Oh, committed.
Yeah, very committed. Not sus at all. Anyway, their confidence was off the charts and they thought they were untouchable. But the longer they kept it up, the more suspicious it became. So with millions of liters of syrup missing, you might be wondering, how does nobody notice that kind of theft? I mean, it's not like you can accidentally just casually misplace 2.7 million liters of liquid gold. Well, strap in, because that's where the story gets even stickier. It all started in July 2012, when the Federation decided it was time to do an inventory check on their syrup reserve. Routine, right? A bit of housekeeping, counting the stock, making sure everything's where it should be. But that's when an inspector climbs up to check a few barrels. And he nearly tips over one because, well, it's empty. And I feel like we all know here syrup barrels are supposed to be heavy, like break your back kind of heavy.
And all because they got sloppy and didn't refill them all.
But I mean, water isn't as heavy as maple syrup either. But
is the inspector going to weigh? I guess with the stock take, remember they weigh them all?
Yeah, well, I guess it'd still be heavy. You wouldn't expect it to tip over. Yeah. Well,
yeah, definitely not empty.
So anyway, so when a barrel moves, it's filled with air, red flags start flying all over the place. Or at least, hopefully, smacking you in the face. At first, the inspector thought it might be a simple mix-up. Maybe someone just grabbed the wrong barrel or something. But the more barrels they checked, the more, oh shit, they found. But the tampered barrels weren't just empty. Some were filled with water to look full, like a classic switcheroo trick. Red. This is the kind of thing you'd see when a teen steals their parents' vodka and tops it up with water, not in a multimillion-dollar heist. I don't know if you ever did that, but I certainly... Yeah,
but it's just
water
like a whiskey
in the vodka.
barrel. There's the evaporated little angel share. This is like the bandit
Angel
share.
share?
Yeah, that's what they call the part of the whiskey that evaporates, right? In the barrels.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, that's what they told us. I mean, I don't know. That's what they said in the whiskey tour in Scotland. They could just make it up for tourists. I don't know.
Well, I was on that tour. I don't remember that.
Oh, maybe I'm just misremembering it.
Okay. So anyway, obviously the inspector's probably losing his damn mind at this point. And soon the Federation higher-ups get wind of what's happening. They rush down to the warehouse to find thousands of barrels tampered with. Imagine it. A bunch of panicked suits in a sticky warehouse, gobsmacked, probably going, are you actually effing kidding me? The sheer dread they must have felt each time they came across another non-syrupy barrel. So moving on. The Federation's absolutely losing it. They've got a warehouse full of what's supposed to be their biggest cash cow, and instead, they're looking at thousands of fake barrels. And so cue the cops, because clearly this switcheroo was no small mistake. This was millions of dollars in stolen syrup, and whoever pulled it off had to make them look like absolute pelicans. And I put that in there for you, my love.
Thank you. I think the Australians will appreciate the humour.
Pelican.
Yeah, the Canadians are going to be offended at the pronunciation. The Australians will like the jokes. Everyone else is,
mid.
The jury's out yet.
Yeah. And trust me, there's one thing you don't want. It's to be on the bad side of the syrup police. Anyway, the Federation wasn't just some friendly neighborhood watch. They had real influence. And when their profits were on the line, they didn't muck around. So with the cops called in, suddenly this sleepy little warehouse was the crime scene of the century. And this investigation kicks off. With over 16,000 barrels to inspect and cross-check, every dodgy one they opened confirmed the Federation's worst fears. they'd been absolutely rinsed. But here's the thing, team. Tracking syrup isn't like tracking cash. It's liquid, it's portable, and once it's mixed in with legal stock, good luck proving which batch is what. Regardless, the forensic teams got busy, and soon enough they found something. Forklift marks on some of the empty barrels. And these marks suggested to the Federation that the barrels had been messed with, because the Federation used special forklift attachments not to damage or leave marks on the barrels. And, well, with this, they were able to trace those marks back to a rented forklift and to none other than Sebastian Litres and our crew. Seriously, if you were running a multi-million-dollar heist, wouldn't you at least try to cover the forklift marks? Like, maybe not leave a rental receipt?
Really?
Yeah, really. They thought they were smart, but, like, they didn't try at all in terms of actually covering this.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we were talking about it, they wouldn't be smart criminals. We wouldn't know.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah. But wait, there's more. Forensic teams found hoses and traces of syrup everywhere, because you try siphoning that much syrup without getting sticky. Imagine the cops at the crime scene, scraping up drops of syrup for evidence. Honestly, it's like CSI Pancake Edition. Law and Order.
Yeah.
Then came the real kicker. There was actually CCTV footage.
CCTV?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got there.
Okay.
Good hustle, team.
Yeah. Trucks. Trucks driving in and out. So it wasn't in the actual warehouse. It was on the outside. So trucks driving in and out like it was Macca's on a Friday night. The footage lined up perfectly with the stolen syrup. These blokes thought they were sneaky, but no, they were on camera the whole time. It's 2012. You'd think about CCTV.
Yeah.
Like, it's like they didn't think it existed or something. Anyway, I mean, a lot of their things, I wonder. Anyway, the cops traced every lead, following the money, watching the movement of syrup sales, and listening in on dodgy whispers about the black market syrup deals. Eventually, the cracks in the heist start to show. They realized whoever was behind this couldn't move millions of liters of syrup on their own. They needed a network of dodgy resellers and insiders. Forensic analysts of syrup kettles, forklifts, and scales helped trace 2/3 of the stolen syrup to companies in New Brunswick, Quebec, Ontario, and the United States. And that's when the dots started to get connected and lead the cops to our friend Richard and his crew. Tracking down black market syrup brokers, unusual transport records, and digging into financial records, they found, surprise, surprise, dodgy transactions, and loads of them. But get this, the crew wasn't exactly subtle with cash either, with the evidence showing a trail of suspicious deposits and withdrawals all linking the gang. They completely forgot about the concept of not leaving a paper trail. Significant amounts of cash from buyers were collected, including a shoebox stuffed with money and a so-called brick of $100 bills, like they've never heard of subtly in their life. Payments lined up perfectly with the stolen syrup, leading them right to Richard, Saint-Pierre, and SK Export. Because, of course, every great heist needs a guy who knows his way around dodgy invoices, right?
There's an auditor that reviews it all. So it's always the auditors ruining the fun,
Well,
They
that is the dodgy.
Well, they figured out all the dodgy,
The auditor's the dodgy.
No, the auditor's the one that figured out all the dodgy,
like,
matching it all up with all the stolen, all it's always.
Yeah. But like to get there, you have to have the sus invoices.
Yeah.
Spruik that payment a little bit higher, a little bit lower. Don't know. Saint-Pierre's company was smuggling syrup for ages. And of course, he was selling the stolen syrup as if it was legit, making sure it disappeared into the market without anyone asking questions. So between the CCTV footage, the forklift marks, the forensic evidence, and the dodgy financial transactions, the police had everything they needed to bring down the entire syrup syndicate. By the end of the investigation, 300 people were questioned, 40 raids were conducted on homes and vehicles, and 17 people were arrested, including our mates, our crew, Vallières, Litres, and St. Pierre. The dodgy black market syrup empire had crumbled. The barrels might have been empty, but the evidence was overflowing. With that, it was time for our sticky-fingered crew to face the music. In October 2016, the trial of a century kicked off. And believe me, this wasn't just your typical theft case. This was a national event. People were glued to the news, waiting to hear how a bunch of disgruntled producers pulled off one of the largest agricultural thefts in history over maple syrup, of all things. As we know, the evidence wasn't just about barrels of syrup, it went way deeper. They had everything: CCTV footage showing trucks rolling in and out of the warehouse, perfectly matching the timeline of the stolen syrup. They had forensic analysis on the barrels, tool marks that match equipment used by the crew, and then there were the financials, my favorite. Every dodgy payment, every suspicious deposit led straight to the heart of this operation. The prosecution came in swinging, determined to paint Richard as the mastermind behind this sticky operation. They laid out their case to show that he didn't just play a bit of a part, he orchestrated the entire thing. From the theft of 9,571 barrels worth of jaw-dropping $18 million to the resale of the stolen goods. They wanted the jury to see just how big and brazen this heist was. To seal the deal, they brought in receipts, quite literally, showing Vallières' suspicious financial moves, hefty cash exchanges, all tying him to the shifty sales. The invoices were dodgy as hell, and it's theorized some payments were made to shell companies with no real business behind them, while others were funneled into personal accounts. And by the way, it wasn't just bits and bobs being funneled. It was huge cash deposits into their personal accounts, all linked to the sale of the stolen syrup. Honestly, it's like they're running a masterclass in what not to do when pulling off a multimillion-dollar heist. Hypothetically, if you and I were planning a heist, I reckon we'd be a bit more smart about it. Maybe not drop a whole bunch of cash into your account at once. Maybe avoid obvious dodgy transactions. Just the thought.
Maybe it's really good at gambling. I don't know.
You just shove like millions of dollars.
Really good day at the races.
Yeah, we are. Mm-hmm. It's not tax deductible. So.
Taxable?
Taxable.
Maybe, yeah.
That's what I meant. Sorry.
Depends if you're a professional, I guess.
What, professional gambler?
Maybe, I don't know. Could be a business activity.
Go talk to the ATO. I feel like rule number one of how to pull off a heist is to not drop millions into your bank account if you've just stolen it. Anyways, then came the witnesses, and one of the most damning testimonies came from none other than our truck driver mate, Sebastian Dutrust.
Don't ever trust the getaway driver.
Exactly. Yep, he flipped like a pancake and gave up the entire operation.
I like these puns. They're really good.
You're welcome. Yeah. He detailed how they planned the heist, avoided inspections, and sold the syrup off to shady buyers. Mate, when the logistic guy turns on you, you know you're done. I like your joke better. And that wasn't all. Syrup industry insiders testified about Valérie's long-running grudge against the Federation. Because it wasn't just about money, it was revenge, his way of sticking it to the syrup mafia. But the prosecution wasn't stopping there. Oh no. They wanted to drive home just how deep this heist cut. They didn't just call it a theft. They made it clear that the 7,500 producers who had stored their syrup on consignment were the real victims of this sticky mess. The Federation's reserve wasn't just some corporate stash. It was the lifeblood of thousands of small-time producers who'd trusted the system to protect their livelihood. But here's where things get really interesting. Richard Resellers didn't just sit there and cop it. Nope. He tried to argue that he wasn't really stealing the syrup. He was just relocating it without permission. Like, can you believe the cheek of it?
That's an interesting way to redefine stealing.
Yeah. I was just moving it.
Without permission.
I thought you wanted me to have it over there, safety. Anyways, he told the court that he wasn't actually trying to rob the Federation blind, that he was coerced in participating in this scheme. He claimed that the Federation's strict regulations had forced his hand, and he was only taking what he and his mates thought was theirs, sort of a protest redistribution, if you will. But let's be real, that defense went down like a sinking ship.
No pancake or syrup pun for that one?
I don't know, like the syrupy remains.
Maybe. I can't think of any puns either, so fair enough.
A ship in syrup? I guess, I don't know. The jury wasn't buying it, and the evidence was overwhelming. And every time the defense tried to spin the narrative, the prosecution hit back with another pile of receipts. Literally. Dodgy payments, shady invoices, and witnesses that blew holes in every excuse the defense threw out. So what's the takeaway? Maybe don't try and pull off a heist if your only defense is the rules were too hard. Sounds like everything when it comes to finances, though. Meanwhile, the Federation was scrambling to pick up the pieces. They'd been rinsed for millions of dollars and made to look like absolute dickwads. Publicly, they played it cool, blaming the criminals and going into damage control by cranking up security and talking big about how they wouldn't let this happen again. Yada yada. But let's be real. They looked like they were caught with their pants down. The heist didn't just hit the Federation's reputation. It sent shockwaves through the entire maple syrup industry. Prices soared, and the market, of course, reacted to the sudden shortage. Producers had to scramble to meet rising demand from the giant black hole left from the heist, whilst the Federation had to implement stricter security measures and revise their storage protocols to prevent future thefts.
It's not very helpful.
It's not very helpful, Kuda. Anyway, these measures, by the way, even included tracking mechanisms on the syrup. It was a wake-up call that even the sweetest industry wasn't immune to crime. This incident forced the Federation to rethink their strategies, leading to increased transparency and collaboration with producers to rebuild trust and stabilize the market. When the dust settled, Richard Resellers, Raymond Resellers, Avec Caron, and Antian St. Pierre faced serious charges. Richard, as the ringleader, got the biggest hit. 8 years in prison and a whopping $9.4 million fine. The court basically said, mate, if you can steal millions in syrup, you can pay it back. He was given 10 years to pay up or face another 6 years in prison. Avec, he got 5 years for his part of being the inside man and fined $1.2 million. Old Raymond copped 6 months and fined nearly $10K. And Antian St. Pierre, with his black market empire, wasn't exactly left off the hook either. They made him pay up over $1 million in fines, which is a lot of pancakes worth of syrup. He received a sentence of 2 years minus a day of house arrest, along with 3 years probation. Because of his cooperation and crucial testimony, Litres, our flipped pancake, received a relatively light sentence of only 8 months in custody. So in the end, this gang of dodgy blokes didn't just steal syrup. They left a massive dent in the industry. The Federation lost millions, the cops spent ages piecing it together, and the public, well, the great Canadian maple syrup heist became a full-blown cultural phenomenon. We're talking documentaries, news headlines, a Netflix episode, and even a Prime miniseries, which is due to drop next month. People couldn't get enough of this ridiculous heist. It captured the public's imagination, turning what seemed to be a quirky crime into a symbol of rebellion against corporate control.
Good. Yeah, man.
It's been years since the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist, but the story lives on as a reminder of just how far people will go when there's sweet cash on the table. I mean, if this whole ordeal taught us one thing, it's that even outside of cozy cabins and pancakes, crime can get real sticky. This isn't... Ooh,
In trouble.
So you might think that after all the arrests and those hefty fines, the story ends there. But guys, like any good heist, there are a few loose ends. The Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist didn't just leave empty barrels behind. It left a bunch of theories and a few sticky questions that still have people scratching their heads. This wasn't just good guesswork. It was well organized, almost too organized for a gang working almost completely from the outside. One of the most pressing questions is, where did all the missing syrup go? The cops recovered some of it, but a huge chunk of it vanished. Where's the rest? Is it sitting in some dodgy warehouse somewhere waiting to flood the market again? Is it quietly slipping into legitimate supply chains with buyers none the wiser? Next time you pour syrup on your pancakes, have a think. You might be tasting a little piece of Canada's biggest crime. And then there's the question of insider involvement. Could there have been individuals within the actual Federation who helped in the heist? The operation scale and position suggest that the sticky bandits could have had inside information, more than that of Avec Caron, who really only just owned the warehouse the Federation used. But what about the Federation itself? Another theory revolves around the potential for a larger criminal network. Was this heist an isolated incident? Or was it part of a bigger scheme involving other high-value items? Or, drugs? The sophistication of the operation, or at least the planning, and not the execution, suggests the possibility of experienced criminals undertaking similar heists. These unresolved questions and theories keep the story alive and living rent-free in the public's mind. The heist may have ended in court, but the mystery is still dripping with possibilities. If there's one thing for certain, the Great Canadian Maple Syrup Heist was a lot more than just stolen syrup. It was a battle for control, a clash of greed, and a scandal that left a sticky mark on the entire syrup industry. $18 million worth of sweet fortune gone in the blink of an eye, leaving the syrup peeps shaken and the public with a newfound respect for breakfast condiments. And if there's one thing we've learned, even the sweet has the sticky, because these syrup bandits showed the world just how fragile the Federation's empire really was. So that's a wrap on this episode of Dirty Money Files. If you've got your own theory about what happened to all that missing syrup, or if you just want to chat breakfast toppings, hit us up on social and don't forget to rate, review, and share this podcast with your mates. Spread the sticky goodness far and wide. Join us next time where we dive into another financial scandal that will have you questioning how anyone thinks they can get away with this shit. Until then, keep your eyes peeled and your pancakes secure. There's always someone out there ready to pour on the trouble. Trust me, you never know who's eyeing that next sticky move. Oh, Kuda.
Oh, at least he saved it till the end.
They created a black market and the gov knows it. I can't wait to do an episode on what comes of that.